It's strange how life works sometimes. For 15 years, I watched my stepmother Victoria live lavishly in my father's mansion, spending money like water while telling me I'd been left nothing. Now, as I stand in my father's study, holding the real will in my hands, I can't help but smile at the irony. I'm Olivia Bennett, 32, and this is the story of how I discovered I'd been my stepmother's landlord all along. The day my father died, I was only 17. I remember Victoria's tears at the funeral, perfect, camera-ready tears that never smudged her expensive mascara. She played the role of the grieving widow flawlessly, accepting condolences with graceful nods while keeping a protective arm around my shoulders. I was young enough to believe her act, to think she actually cared about me. "Don't worry, darling," she'd whispered, her designer perfume overwhelming me as she pulled me close. "I'll take care of everything." What I didn't realize then was that everything meant systematically erasing any trace of my inheritance. A week after the funeral, Victoria called a family meeting. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she held up a document. "I have devastating news," she announced, her voice catching theatrically. "James's investments, they've all failed. The accounts are empty." My uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother and a financial advisor, looked skeptical. "That's impossible. James was worth millions." Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "It's all gone. The market crash, he took risks. I had no idea until his lawyer showed me the paperwork." She turned to me, her green eyes swimming with practiced concern. "Olivia, darling, I'm so sorry. Your father, he wanted to leave you something, but there's nothing left." I was too shocked, too grief-stricken to question her. My father had been a brilliant businessman, building his real estate empire from nothing. How could everything be gone? Uncle Marcus tried to investigate, but Victoria had an answer for everything. Documents showing massive losses, paperwork proving failed investments, even emails supposedly from my father discussing his financial troubles. Looking back, I should have questioned how perfectly organized this evidence was, how conveniently it explained everything. "At least we still have the mansion," Victoria sighed, gesturing at the sprawling estate around us. "James managed to protect that much. We'll have to be careful with money, but we won't be homeless." I nodded numbly, grateful at least for that. The mansion had been my home since I was 5, filled with memories of my father. Victoria insisted I stay there until I finished high school, playing the role of the caring stepmother perfectly. But once I left for college, everything changed. "Olivia, darling," she'd say whenever I came home for breaks, "I know money is tight, but you need to understand, I can't keep supporting you forever. Your father would want you to stand on your own 2 feet." The irony of her words, spoken while she lounged by our Olympic-sized pool in designer swimwear, wearing jewelry that could have paid for my entire education, wasn't lost on me. But what could I do? According to every document, every piece of evidence, my father had died penniless except for the mansion. So I did what he would have wanted. I worked hard. Through college, I took every job I could find, studying business and real estate between shifts as a barista, tutor, and retail worker. My father had built his empire from nothing. I would do the same. After graduation, I landed a job at a small real estate firm. The starting salary barely covered my rent in a tiny studio apartment, but I was determined to succeed. Meanwhile, Victoria continued living in luxury at the mansion, throwing lavish parties and redecorating on a whim. "Oh, Olivia," she'd say whenever I visited, examining my off-the-rack clothes with barely concealed disdain. "You should learn to dress more professionally. First impressions are everything in real estate. Your father always understood that." Each word was a carefully placed dagger, designed to remind me of what I'd lost. But something about her constant mentions of my father kept nagging at me. Victoria had always been materialistic, but she'd never been stupid. How had she maintained her lifestyle for 15 years on supposedly nothing? The answer began to unfold 3 months ago, when Uncle Marcus called me out of the blue. "Olivia, do you remember your father's study? The one Victoria keeps locked." Of course I remembered. It was the only room in the mansion that remained exactly as my father had left it. Victoria claimed it was too painful to change anything, though that hadn't stopped her from renovating every other inch of the house. "Your father had a safe in there," Marcus continued, "behind the painting of the lighthouse. Do you remember the combination?" I did. It was my birthday. My father had shown me once years ago, saying someday I'd need to know it. But after his death, Victoria had claimed the safe was empty. "Why are you asking about this now?" I questioned. Marcus's voice grew serious. Because I finally found proof that something's not right. Victoria's been accessing accounts that supposedly don't exist. I think whatever's in that safe might tell us the truth. My heart started racing. For 15 years, I'd accepted Victoria's story because I had no choice. But now, the annual charity gala is next week, I said slowly. Victoria never misses it. The house will be empty. Marcus understood immediately. I'll help you get in. The next week passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. The night of the gala, I watched from my car as Victoria's Bentley pulled out of the driveway, her silhouette perfect, as always in what was probably another designer gown bought with my father's money. I waited 30 minutes to be sure she was gone, then used my old key to enter the mansion. The familiar scent of Victoria's expensive candles filled the air, mixed with something else, a staleness that lingered beneath the artificial fragrance, like decay hidden under perfume. The study door was locked, but Uncle Marcus had come prepared. As a member of the family, he still occasionally visited Victoria, and during his last visit, he'd managed to make a copy of the key. My hands trembled as I turned it in the lock. The study looked exactly as I remembered: dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the large painting of a lighthouse that had always been my father's favorite. Together, Marcus and I carefully lifted it off the wall, revealing the safe behind it. I took a deep breath and entered my birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside, we found stacks of documents, the real documents. Bank statements showing active accounts worth millions. Property deeds. Investment portfolios. And most importantly, my father's true will. As I read it, tears filled my eyes. Not only had my father left me half his fortune, but he'd set up a complex trust that would give me full control of his entire real estate empire on my 30th birthday, which had passed 2 years ago. She faked everything, Marcus whispered, examining the documents. The papers showing the losses, the failed investments, all forgeries. Olivia, you don't just own half the estate. According to these documents, you're technically Victoria's landlord. She's been living in your property, spending your money, for 15 years. I sank into my father's leather chair, overwhelmed by the truth. Victoria hadn't just stolen my inheritance, she'd stolen 15 years of my life. Years I'd spent struggling, doubting myself, trying to build from scratch what had been mine all along. But as the initial shock wore off, another emotion took over: determination. Victoria had played the long game, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was my father's daughter. I knew how to play too. For the next 2 months, Marcus and I worked quietly with a team of lawyers, documenting everything. We tracked every penny Victoria had spent, every account she'd accessed illegally. The evidence was overwhelming. I could have confronted her immediately, but that would have been too easy. No, Victoria deserved something special. Something she'd never forget. So I waited for the perfect moment, her annual celebration of James' party, where she invited all their old friends to remember my father. The irony was almost poetic. The mansion was full of guests when I arrived, all of them dressed in their finest, just as Victoria demanded. She stood at the center of the grand staircase, resplendent in a red designer gown, holding court like the queen she thought she was. "Olivia, darling," she called out when she saw me. "I didn't expect you tonight. You usually find these events too difficult." I smiled, channeling her own brand of sweet venom. "Actually, Victoria, I wouldn't miss this one for the world. After all, we're here to honor my father's legacy, aren't we?" Something in my tone must have warned her, because her perfect smile faltered slightly. Before she could respond, I turned to address the crowd. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The room quieted. "First, I want to thank Victoria for hosting these celebrations all these years. It's so important to remember how my father lived, and what he left behind." Victoria's face had gone pale. She knew. She had to know. "In fact," I continued, "I recently discovered some fascinating documents about my father's legacy. Victoria, would you like to explain them, or should I?" She tried to maintain her composure, but I could see panic in her eyes. "Olivia, darling, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Oh, but I insist." I pulled out a folder. "You see, everyone, for 15 years, Victoria has claimed my father died nearly penniless. That his investments failed, his accounts were empty. She even showed us proof." I paused, letting the tension build. "Forged proof." The room erupted in whispers. Victoria gripped the staircase railing, her knuckles white. "Would anyone like to see the real documents? The real will. The bank statements showing how she's been spending my inheritance for 15 years. I looked directly at Victoria. Or should we discuss the legal implications of falsifying documents and committing fraud? You're lying, she hissed, but her voice shook. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can prove everything. You see, Victoria, you made one crucial mistake. You thought if you kept my father's study locked, if you controlled access to the safe, your secrets would stay hidden. But you forgot something important. I smiled, remembering my father's words from so long ago. He showed me the combination when I was 12. He knew someday I'd need it. The color drained completely from her face as she realized her mistake. All these years, the evidence of her deception had been there, protected by nothing more than a combination she thought only she knew. As of today, I announced to the stunned crowd, I am exercising my legal right as owner of this property. Victoria, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises. My security team will supervise your packing to ensure you don't take anything that isn't yours. Though given that virtually everything here was bought with my money, that won't be much. You can't do this, she shrieked, finally losing her carefully maintained composure. This is my home. No, Victoria, it's not. It never was. You're just a tenant who overstayed her welcome by about 15 years. I turned to the security team that had entered quietly during my speech. Please escort Ms. Reynolds to her room to pack her personal belongings. And make sure she doesn't accidentally take any family heirlooms with her. As Victoria was led away, still protesting, Uncle Marcus appeared at my side. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. You handled that exactly as he would have. I watched as the woman who had stolen 15 years of my life was escorted upstairs, her designer dress sweeping the steps she would never descend as queen of this house again. No, I replied. I handled it better. Dad would have just kicked her out. I made sure she had an audience. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Victoria tried to fight it, of course, hiring expensive lawyers with what little money she had squirreled away in her personal accounts. But the evidence was overwhelming. Not only did she lose the case, but she's now facing criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. The mansion feels different now. I've removed every trace of Victoria's gaudy renovations, restoring it to the elegant home my father created. His study remains exactly as it was, though the safe is empty now, its contents safely stored in multiple secure locations. As for me, I've taken my rightful place as head of my father's, now my real estate empire. The employees who were loyal to Victoria have been replaced, and under my leadership, the company is thriving even more than before. Sometimes, I drive past the small apartment complex where Victoria now lives, a far cry from the mansion she called home for so long. I heard she's had to take a job as a real estate agent, ironically enough. Apparently, all those years of pretending to know the business taught her something. The other day, I received a letter from her, a long, rambling apology filled with excuses and pleas for forgiveness. She even suggested we could work something out if I was willing to be reasonable. I had my assistant send back a single-page response, a copy of her eviction notice from 15 years ago, with one line added at the bottom. Karma takes time, but it never forgets. Uncle Marcus says I should let go of my anger, that holding on to it only gives her power over me. He's probably right. But every time I sit in my father's study, looking at the lighthouse painting that hid the truth for so long, I think about the scared 17-year-old girl who believed she'd lost everything. I did eventually forgive that girl for being too trusting, too naive. But Victoria? Some debts can never be repaid, no matter how many years pass. The mansion stands as a testament to that truth, its windows gleaming in the sunlight like knowing eyes. Inside, my father's legacy lives on, no longer hidden behind Victoria's lies. And in his study, where it all ended and began again, the safe remains, empty now, but a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. As for me, I'm exactly where I should have been all along, standing at the helm of my father's empire, proving that his daughter is more than capable of carrying his legacy forward. Victoria thought she could erase me from my father's story, but instead, she just gave me a better one to tell. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in my father's study, surrounded by the life he built and the legacy he left me. In those quiet moments, I swear I can feel him here, proud of the woman I've become despite, or perhaps because of everything Victoria put me through. And you know what? He's right to be proud. Because in the end, I didn't just reclaim my inheritance, I proved that I deserved it. That's the thing about karma. It doesn't just even the score. Sometimes, if you're patient enough, it lets you write the final chapter yourself. As for Victoria, Last I heard, she's writing a book about her life as a wealthy socialite. Probably another attempt to cash in on my father's name. But this time, nobody's buying her story. They're too busy reading mine. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.